Trump tried to clear up any confusion there was about whether the Canada and Mexico tariffs of 25% were going to take place on Tuesday, and he said they indeed will. And he added a bit of a surprise. He said, "Oh, and I'm also going to add 10% tariffs to Chinese imports, which he already imposed 10% tariffs on China. So this is another 10%, and that will also take effect on Tuesday. So we're looking at the three largest U.S. trading partners. About 40% of U.S. merchandise trade is done with these three countries, totaling something like $2 trillion a year. So he's turning the screws on China in particular, and trying to drive a deal. It sounds like before midnight Monday into Tuesday with Canada and Mexico.
What's the off ramp then?
The off ramp is Canada and Mexico scrambling to show him that they're doing what he would like them to do on fentanyl trafficking and illegal migration. They have already done a number of things. The question is, what exactly are the goals that they could reach, and is it, and are those even attainable, in the next 4 days now? So
all right, Brendan, dumb question of the day. How do tariffs work? Like, who puts the tariff on which party? How quickly does it happen? Can you just explain the mechanics here?
yeah, it's a pretty quick switch that the directive comes from the president. It goes into the Federal Register. It is transmitted to the Customs and Border Agency, and they plug it into their computer system, and that system that importers and exporters are connected to, customs agents and the intermediaries of trade. That suddenly appears on their computer screen as it's another 10% in the case of China come Tuesday. So it all can happen pretty quickly. At the moment, these are just threats. The only tariffs that are in effect since Trump was inaugurated on January 20th are 10% on China. But there are a half dozen or so others, including tariffs on the European Union, that he's threatened to put in place over the next five or 6 weeks.
So now what? Like, if I'm an economist and I'm looking at my models, like, what am I plugging in now to know, like, what growth is going to be, what inflation is going to be, what personal consumption is going to be?
Yeah, Bloomberg Economics have done a lot of number crunching in this area, and they do show that the tariffs will have an impact on growth, on inflation. The freshest number we have was that the tariffs on the European Union that he's threatening will cut their GDP by 1.5%. Now, 1.5% sounds like a small number, but we're talking, to an economy in the multiple trillions of dollars. So it's a lot of money. Businesses pay it, and then businesses pass those costs on to consumers. So the goal from the Trump administration is to drive production to the U.S. But in the meantime, somebody's got to pay these tariffs, and until those jobs are created, as Trump hopes they are, it will have there'll be upward pressure on prices for the products that he's targeting.